Learning to speak English fluently, reaching like an advanced level of fluency, doesn't need to take 5-10 years like in a lot of professionals' cases if you understand the learning process, so you know what to focus on every single time you try. Have a clear goal that you will do whatever it takes to get. All effective English communicators focus on to learn to speak English fluently and confidently is the 3 things this video is going to tell you more about, which include building and maintaining habits, so even the most challenging parts of learning English, whether it's having conversations with other people or understanding fast English speakers, feel easier. Remember the quote from Frédéric Matthias Alexander: people don't decide their futures, they decide their habits, and then their habits decide their future. A positive growth mindset, so every time you try, you do your best instead of focusing on doing the best, and you will see how understanding this is key to learning to speak English fluently and confidently 10 times faster. Lastly, probably something a lot of struggling English students don't realize, and the reason they spend a lot of their time studying grammar and memorizing words, and then because they don't see a lot of progress with their fluency, they take a break for like 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, and then go back to taking classes, probably at a language school or with a private teacher. But then after 6 months or a year, again, they take a break that ends up being 2-3 year long accountability. Learning a language is simple. Most struggling English students overcomplicate it, either spending way too much passive time watching movies but then don't remember a lot of the vocabulary that they're learning from them. They know a lot of the theory, a lot of the grammar rules, they might even know a lot of vocabulary that they recognize from movies whenever they read an article, maybe something they have to read for their research, their job, but they don't have the confidence to communicate with other people. Now, if you find yourself in this situation, this ends today. If you're not dedicating the little bit of free time you have in between your full-time job or managing your own company, the time you need to spend dealing with people around you, your kids, your friends, hobbies that lift you up, to actively learning English, you're unlikely to learn to speak English fluently and confidently 10 times faster. One of the most common reasons struggling English students spend a lot of years trying, studying, memorizing, learning, watching videos, trying out different apps, taking courses, but never really have the confidence to communicate and express themselves at pretty good, like advanced or proficient levels, is because they don't know how to learn. And it's not your fault if you don't know how to learn. In school, nobody gets a subject like learn how to learn. But it's important for us to understand that learning English isn't just grammar and vocabulary, it's an emotional journey. If you're interested in some of the most effective ways my students remember vocabulary and build their fluency, you can check out the video where I mentioned all of the things you need to do so you can start learning to learn better. The science of learning tells us a lot about effective learning, but one thing is sure: we learn through experience, not studying more, not reading more upon some sort of topic, not consuming more information, but by taking action and experiencing the things we want to get better at. It simply feels challenging to remember vocabulary or to express ourselves, to connect sentences together so we can articulate ourselves way more effectively, is because we haven't worked enough on those neural connections in our brain that are responsible for that skill, for making that experience easier for you once it's already automatic. In the previous video, I shared a lot of vulnerable stuff about my own experience with learning English as well, and how believing that your English is always good enough to rise up to that next challenge is going to be crucial for you to start believing that whenever you feel challenged, whenever you feel a bit frustrated or uncomfortable, that's when you're learning, because that's when you're focusing on making those neural connections stronger. Of course, this includes one of the most important parts, which is not aiming to do something that's completely out of your reach and super difficult for you to do, but to optimize the level. Whenever a new student, a professional, whether it's a marketing specialist, a business expert, a lawyer, or a psychologist, come to me for help with their fluency and confidence, first we always look at their profession, in what contexts they expect to use English in what contexts they want to use English in. Maybe they want to talk about, one of my students is a marine biologist and she loves talking about nature, environmental protection, global warming, stuff like that. And then we always aim at creating activities for them that are optimized at their level. Build and maintain effective English learning habits where they can actually practice for the situations they are likely to communicate English in. First, always think about, what are you learning English for? In what contexts do you expect to use English in? You need to get better at handling phone calls, or you're a logistics expert who needs to get better at negotiating. How many presentations do you need to deliver within a year in front of your colleagues? You actively have to participate in meetings where you need to invite other people to share their opinions or make a decision as a group. And with these mini goals in mind, focusing on one thing at a time, you can always create habits around your daily routine that will actually help you make progress with that one thing that you're focusing on each month or each week. I remember back then when I finally broke through this fear of making mistakes and spent the next 2 years getting to the advanced level. A big chunk of my practice was active listening. I spent like 2-3 hours a day watching series, movies, anything I could find that I was interested in. But the focus here is on active, because if I have a look at the majority of people who keep watching movies, who keep listening to podcasts, they don't really remember a lot of the vocabulary or useful expressions, sentences that they learned from those videos. Again, because of lack of conversation practice or putting it into practice. They don't just practice understanding, but also learn how to use the vocabulary they're learning. Struggling English students usually only focus on understanding those movies. So if I ask them after a movie, okay, what do you remember from that movie? They don't remember anything, whereas effective English communicators use movies as a source of a lot of useful language that they can start using in their conversations. And my students get a lot of trainings over how to make the best use of their time when they are watching a video or a movie. Many times it's the small but challenging things that you decide to make time for that will eventually determine how fast you're learning English. I remember when I was around 20, I spent at least 10-15 minutes in the morning and then another 10-15 minutes in the evening actively reviewing the vocabulary that I was learning from the movies or videos I was watching. And I wasn't just rereading my notes, because that's just a passive way of basically even more studying that's not going to help us remember vocabulary. But because I really wanted to actively use the vocabulary I was learning in my next conversations, I always practice actively recording vocabulary, which is something I dive much deeper into in another video you can check out. Now, these study sessions, like 20-30 minutes a few times a week, is where you can actually start focusing on analyzing structures of a conversation, so you can remember those prepositions more accurately, so you can eliminate some of the mistakes that you got feedback on, so you can start refining your English to articulate yourself better, which is something that just randomly watching videos and consuming a lot of content doesn't help us achieve. And the rest, I would say about 25% of your learning experience, is where you implement everything you're learning from watching those videos, those podcasts, and whatever you are studying. The 3 important components of it are conversations done consistently at or a little bit above your level. So you're actually challenging yourself a bit and you slowly build your confidence. This is where being intentional anytime you practice speaking is going to be really, really important to see progress within a short amount of time. So even when I was like practicing my fluency, just randomly talking about something, I always had a purpose, whether it was describing stuff in my room or talking about what you can find in my hometown. But most of the time it was speaking practice, something we really focus a lot on with my students in class, that trains my students to be able to use better expressions, longer expressions, to express themselves way more complex ways and to help them use a wide variety of vocabulary. We always focus on one particular communicative skill that we want to get better at. For example, when I was practicing how to give advice, I used expressions like my best bet would be to, there's no harm in, or you'll be well advised to do XYZ. And please, please, please don't be that type of person who just randomly speaks, who just looks for random friends to practice with without any goal or intention or consistency, and then wonders why they haven't made a lot of progress. Setting intentions is key. None of this would ever have worked if I hadn't focused on what the rest of the video is going to tell you about. The 2 things that helped me build my fluency and gain confidence in speaking English faster than most people a positive mindset and accountability. So be honest with yourself. Are you bringing the best out of yourself in every conversation you have? Are you making the most out of the limited amount of time or the limited number of opportunities you have available to improve your fluency? One thing I learned in life, and I'm gonna keep on telling you this until I'm blue in the face, is that life is way too short to stay in our perfection. And so many struggling English students spend a lot of their time trying to study grammar, but then they end up making a ton of mistakes when they speak, or memorize a lot of vocabulary, but then they don't remember much of that when they have a conversation. They study with textbooks, apps, videos, everything they can find, but still don't have the confidence to have a conversation in front of other people because they worry so much about messing up the conversation, making mistakes, forgetting vocabulary, or mispronouncing words. Have you ever met someone who speaks English fluently and confidently, who got there because they only spoke when they spoke English perfectly and kept holding themselves back just because they were making mistakes or mispronouncing words? Speaking English in front of other people is a vulnerable experience for all of us. We all get a bit self-conscious about some mistakes we might make, some prepositions we forget, especially at the beginning stages of practicing speaking a second language. But does that mean we should keep holding back and not keeping on trying to get better and better? Struggling English students who choose to stay in their perfection believe that the only way they feel safe is if they speak perfectly, which then never happens, and then because that never happens, they waste a lot of their time, if not all their lives, trying to be perfect. Who says that we can't be safe when we make a mistake or when we don't pronounce a word correctly? You see, perfection is simply a deeply rooted fear of failure, but who can avoid failure? This is ultimately a big part of my mission as an English coach. I always commit to bringing the best out of every single student, client, anybody who comes into my space, into my business. Because when someone doesn't even regularly practice speaking or challenge themselves, take risks and use some new phrases, expressions in their speaking practice, they don't actively request feedback, so they finally realize what they keep making mistakes with, and repeat the same grammar mistakes, use basic words to express themselves after years and years of studying. Are those people really bringing the best out of every single time they can practice? There is always something you can do, whether it's for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. However uncomfortable it is, you can always do something. This is what I call, instead of operating from perfectionism, operating from excellence. Realizing that every time you try, if you focus on the right way of practicing, you're always going to improve. But if you never try, you never improve. So even when you feel like you can't focus, you can't give your 100% after a long day at work, after some overtime, or spending time with your family when your head is like double the usual size, you can still do something. And that something that you think is only 40% of what you could normally do is your 100% on that day. You have a choice every single day, and I will keep creating videos to remind you. How will you make choices about your fluency in English after watching this video? Still operating from perfection, waiting, hiding, wondering, hoping, overthinking, procrastinating, and then never seeing progress with your fluency? Or are you going to be choosing to operate from excellence and say, well, we learn from experience, so if I try, whether it's for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and focus on bringing the best out of myself in that situation, staying as consistent as I can with that practice, I'm going to improve. The reason it's so important for us to learn how to learn and understand what helps us step into this positive mindset is because learning is your responsibility. You can always tap into the most up-to-date, scientifically researched activities to help you improve your fluency. You can always hire the most experienced, most supportive coaches and surround yourself with the loveliest, most inspiring people to practice with. But your choices about learning, whether you focus on the learning process or you just keep studying in the old-fashioned ways that school taught you how to learn a language, depends on you. This is why I'm absolutely sure I would never have gained confidence in speaking English as someone who used to struggle a lot with my shyness if I hadn't stayed accountable and responsible for my thoughts, my beliefs, how I reacted to my emotions and my actions. I knew that it was only up to me to challenge myself, to take risks in a conversation, to make time for as much conversation as possible, and to really bring the best out of myself, so I'm not ending up repeating myself, using the same sentences, the same words, making the same mistakes, without which I would have stayed at the intermediate level. What helps all my students, and this is why we are so focused on building our community as powerful as we can, expand their vocabulary so they can talk about a variety of different topics as they keep going and learn to speak English fluently and confidently 10 times faster, is that they practice in a safe and powerful place full of ambitious professionals who all work towards their goals, so nobody judges them. On the contrary, we lift each other up, we keep supporting each other. They inspire each other to take courage, keep facing their next challenge, and encourage them to continue when things don't really go so well and they're about to give up. Psychology tells us, and this is even more important for those struggling English students who have difficulties with taking responsibility for their actions, their habits, their thoughts, we are more likely to do things, to find the courage and the discipline to do things when other people are involved, because simply we don't want to break our promises that we made to other people. Plus, when we are falling off track and we feel like, well, life gets really busy and I need to focus on this and that and I need to prioritize this and that in my life, it's the community, the support, the positive experience of practicing with them that can help us get back on track, so we don't give up way too soon before we even get the results with our confidence. And I can see every single day whenever I look into the community space that my students use to connect with each other, share loads of videos so they can get that next job, that promotion, that client from another country, or starting a new life in another country. That it's the community aspect, that social learning that doesn't just allow my students to stay accountable and then keep on going and improving, but that's where they always share their own experience of what it feels like to not understand something on a podcast, and then gives them hope that, okay, I'm not the only person struggling with not understanding this guy's accent, or I'm not the only person who struggles with finding time for reviewing vocabulary. When you realize that other people are facing the same problems, they are struggling with the same issues around learning English as you, gives you relief, because through this social learning, you realize there's nothing wrong with me. Hope this gives you a clear view around what I focused on so I can learn to speak English fluently and confidently 10 times faster than most people. And let me know in the comments below, which of these 3 things are you going to start focusing more on so you can see faster progress with your fluency. Let me know, and hope you'll have a lovely and amazing rest of your day today. Thank you so much for watching.